Hey everyone, hi, welcome or welcome back. So I don't know what's happening, but lately I feel a little perfectionist about the channel. I don't know why or where that's coming from. And so I thought sometimes I just need to get that out, to acknowledge where I'm at with the channel and to kind of help move as a step forward to move, as a step to move forward. That's what I was trying to say. At this point, I have filmed the beginning of this several times and I feel like I'm just like getting myself tied into a knot. So I'm trying to loosen the knot a little bit so that I can move forward and do this video. So I just wanted to say that right up front, but I also want to say, if you tell me your favorite reads for this year. I love to hear from you, and sometimes I'm just, I don't know, I get like Steve, I was watching Steve this morning. He was like, it's so unnatural. It's so unnatural to sit in front of a camera and talk to yourself. And you have to kind of keep that space open. Otherwise it will close, because this is a very odd thing to do. And I think that, sometimes I push so hard to make this very natural, and it's nice to admit to oneself that it is a weird hobby to have. And this is not my job. This is just a thing that I like to do. And sometimes I forget to admit to my own self that it's an oddity. It's an oddity to sit down and talk about books and reading with imaginary people, and essentially to myself in a room with a camera. So anyways, I don't know, I guess I was just feeling a little, again, kind of tied in a knot. I'm like, gosh, I've started this video so many times and it's wearing me out. It's wearing me down. And it's not sustainable if I come to you all and I'm just like worn out by my own self and my own perfectionism. And so I could either lean into it and start scripting my videos or really practicing them, which I have been doing more, or I can sort of let go and be okay with being imperfect. And I would rather do the latter thing. Of course, I actually quite like doing the former thing too, because I don't know, it's a different side, a different prep style to the videos. But I also just want to be able to sit down and talk. And sometimes I think I'm pushing so hard for it to be natural that it feels unnatural. And then I'm restarting over and over, and that's like the part that you all don't see. And so I just wanted to say that right up front, because again, I was starting to feel like a really tight knot in this video making process. And I don't want to feel like a tight little wound up knot trying to get the video out, like I want it to be enjoyable and relaxing. So, with all of that, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be talking about, unfortunately, the 13, and it's because 13 is an unlucky number, the 13 wonderful books that I read this year. Now, typically at this point of the year, we do a mid-year book freakout tag as a community, and I was looking at those questions, and I was feeling tragically uninspired. Who is your favorite fictional crush? I don't have one. What kind of plans do you have for the end of the year, or like what book do you need to read before the end of the year? I don't have one. Biggest surprise, I have several. Biggest disappointment, meh, like I don't really want to talk about it. And so instead I was like, let me just talk about the 13 books that have given me a lot of joy, that were surprising in one way or another, that really resonated with me. And that will be the video in which that will mark the mid-year of my reading. So as I'm talking, I hope that you all will leave your comments of what you have loved this year. Those comments mean so much to me. And yeah, if you're new, then you got an earful of my philosophy on my channel. Love to read. Subscribe if you like. Now let's go ahead and get into the meat of this video. The first book is Days Without End by Sebastian Barry. In this, we are following a young man. He's, I think, 17, Thomas McNulty, and his comrade in arms, John Cole. And Thomas is from Ireland, and we're getting the story from his perspective. So there's this like wonderful Irish lilt. There's these beautiful turns of phrases. it's quite poetic in parts. However, it's this juxtaposition between the poetry of the language that Sebastian Barry is using and the rawness of the setting. This is set in America in 1850, and Thomas, he and John are just trying to make it, so they take on these odd jobs and get into these troops, and they fight, and there's all this stuff that's going on. So it's like everything that they're experiencing is kind of gruesome and in a lot of ways raw. They're talking about gangrene and sickness and fighting, and so there's a lot going on in terms of like the rawness of the experience, but it's told through this like beautiful language. and Thomas is just one of those characters that I just fell in love with, that I was very sympathetic towards, and that I couldn't help rooting for. I just really enjoyed being with Thomas. And I know this is the first book of, I think, like a literary duology in which you probably don't need to read the first book in order to read the second book. But now that Sebastian Barry is on my mind, I'm like, oh, I would actually really enjoy reading something else by him. So there's that. A book that I have talked about quite a bit because it really marked the beginning of my of a book. It marked the beginning of really good reads. Okay, so I read this and I was like, oh, I'm gonna have a good reading year. And it was The Mistress of the Ritz by Melanie Benjamin. This is about Blanche and Claude Azello. Now they are this is set during World War II. Claude is the manager of the Ritz, which is a gorgeous, I mean, I would love to go see the Ritz in real life. And as he is serving this, really uppity, really bourgeois clientele, the Nazis are starting to occupy, I think, France, right? Paris, yes. I always doubt myself. So the Nazi occupation in Paris is becoming very apparent. And Claude and Blanche both react to this occupation in their own unique ways. And then it's also interesting because it's doing this thing that I quite like, and it is exploring deeply the relationship that these two have. And it's giving the reader context for their relationship that isn't and hasn't always been straightforward. And then we get to this critical moment, this moment where things are going to change because the nature of the country is changing, the nature of their jobs and their setting is dramatically changing. And so it's sort of left to wonder, what are they going to do, and how is that going to affect their relationship that at least I was quite invested in. And so we get to this 75% mark, and I was like, I have to know what's going to happen. And I was just like ripped through the rest of the story. I couldn't put it down. I was so in it. And when I finished this, which was it was like the first really good book I read in the year, I was like, okay, I could have a favorite for the year. It was breathing a sigh of relief. Whereas I remember last year, one of the things that I think bothered me was that it's like I didn't read a favorite until near like the latter half of the year. So there's always this question of like, am I going to read a really, really, really good book this year? And for me, it was like right away, I was like, oh yeah, I read a really, really good book. The year is saved. A couple of nonfiction books. A biography that I had wanted to read forever, which was The Life She Wished to Live, a biography of Marjorie Kinnan Rowlings. This is by Anne McCutcheon, and this is about a Floridian writer, although she wasn't natively, she's not a native Floridian, which is the deep South here in the United States. And she wrote The Yearling, which is set in Florida. It has these really wonderful, colorful characters and very fascinating. It's got a great setting. Like the setting is a character in and of itself. And I think McCutcheon did such a great job, not only helping the reader understand what kind of writer Rowlings was and why place was so important to her, which I think was at the central idea of this book, because, you know, it's like the life she wished to live. And it was really the, like, in terms of place and the push and pull of why place was so important to her. Anyways, and then, you know, clicking with the Floridian landscape, which has a very particular personality. It's wild and hot and rugged in and of itself. But also, like, the book was fabulously structured. So at one point, Marjorie gets herself into some hot water because of a description she wrote about a character, and that person took her to court. And so there's like this courtroom case that happens, you know, right at the 2/3 mark. So you're kind of like, what is the outcome going to be? And so not only was it cleverly structured, it was just like impeccably researched and really showed a balanced look at Marjorie, who was, you know, her life wasn't always straightforward. And so anyway, it was fascinating, a fascinating book. And I really do enjoy literary biographies, even if it takes me a while to get to them or read through them. I find them very, very gratifying. So this was just wonderful. The other nonfiction book my dad has right now, actually I gave it to my mom and then my dad took it over. So he's reading it. My mom was like, grr, arg. Like, Shelley gave that to me. And it is The Unwomanly Face of War by Svetlana Alexievich, which is an oral history of the women who fought in World War II, the women from the Soviet Union that fought in World War II. And some of the scenes are haunting. And I think it took me a long time to finally actually read this book. And I think I was frightened of it because a lot of you in my comments said that the book will stay with me for a long time. And I think that I just thought of it in like the darkest sense of the word, like the reason why A Little Life has stayed with me for a long time. But really what I discounted or what I didn't acknowledge was that the book also stays with you because there are these moments of sort of levity. And I wouldn't say joy, but there is moments of raw real life, like laughter and silliness and young women just growing up and the way that they were treated, but in like this really beautiful and wonderful way. Like the women in war were never treated so well, so much like women, except for when they were at war, because the men treated them as if they were, as the women that they were, not as if they were women, but as the women that they were. Like they looked out for them. And then it was almost like they talked about this really jarring experience of then going back to civilian life and not having that respect and honor that they had while they were on the battlefield, which was just bizarre. But some of the points that Alexievich makes, which was so wonderful, was that the experience of a woman at war was very different than the men at war. And she does a really good job painting this picture of why. And I don't know, there was just it was really touching. It was really interesting. I loved it enough to like pass it on to my parents. And yeah, and it's just, I think it will be one that will stick with me for a long time, partially because of some of the harsh realities that Alexievich wrote about, or that were shared with her, but also because there were some true moments of like, that brought a smile to my face. And I think some of it is the innocence that these young women brought to the front line, and to sort of grip on, you know, to hold on to that. A book of alternative history that I wouldn't have read if it were not for Melinda at a Web of Stories. She and I, along with others, are hosting Historical Fiction 2025 together. And Melinda's prompt was read a work of alternative historical fiction, which is playing the what if game. What if Germany won World War II? What if, you know, I mean, what if these these little moments in history that you kind of in your mind go down this trail of what could have happened. And so the what if book, the what if game happened in this book, which is Rodm by Curtis Sittenfeld. Curtis Sittenfeld. Now I want to read Prep by this author because that's her most known work, and I really enjoyed this. So this is what if Hillary didn't marry Bill Clinton, and the paths that they would have taken. So we get Hillary's career through, 80s, 90s, all the way up to 2016 16. And the precipice, the turning point in the book is, you know, truly what if Hillary had said no to Bill's proposal? And it was really interesting. Now, it's heavy on American politics, and I do think the first half is more interesting than the second half. But I also think that Sittenfeld did such a good job making Hillary a likable character, making her one that you would root for. I really enjoyed also this secondary and tertiary characters that just pop in and out in her life and the relationships that she had. I just really enjoyed it. It was a way better book than I think I had anticipated going in. And I'm so glad to have read it. And I'm so glad to Melinda to put that prompt in the event. Otherwise, I wouldn't have read this. And this was great. So there's this. Another book. Well, let's think. Three books that I was sure that I was going to like. And I did end up liking. The first being Julia Hungry by Hannah Louise Poston. Hannah is a prize-winning poet. This is her book of prize-winning poetry. And what is interesting is that I'm going to meet, if everything comes together seamlessly, I'm going to meet Hannah in real life, and I want her to sign my book. But there are some poems in here that I still think about. I read this several months ago, and I'm still thinking about some of the poems. There's one that tells the story of Britney Spears, and it's told in this very particular way that I still think about. I don't know. It's not that I think about Britney Spears very often, but when I think about Britney Spears, when I see her, I think of the poem that Hannah wrote. There's also a poem, Sorry Not Sorry. There's a poem that I read of hers that is on my channel, actually. So I was really glad to get to this. I thought I was going to like it, but there's always this, like, I don't know, like, I admire Hannah so much. She also has a YouTube channel. Like, I admire her so much. What if I don't like it? And I didn't have to worry at all because I really enjoyed it. Then a book that it took me forever to read, but it was timing on my part, but it was the first book in Dorothy Dennett's The Lyman Chronicles. This is The Game of Kings. Dorothy Dennett is a genius. So this is, we're set in 1547 in Scotland, and we are essentially following Lyman, he is a rat of a character. He is sly, and there's this uncertainty as to whether he's good or bad, whether he's fighting for Scotland or against them. And it's really about who he is, and, you know, is he trying to clear his name or is he just causing trouble? But what's so great, her plotting is very, very good. Dorothy Dennett's plotting is really exceptional. But what was really interesting about this book in particular was the sharpness of language. Oh my gosh, it was razor sharp. You could prick your finger on the sharpness of her prose because it is that good. And I think that that's what stands out the most. I mean, you could probably turn to any page and get something clever on it. And I don't say that lightly. And it's just a fantastic book to boot. So this was great. Another book that shocked me for its use of language, and it is Milkman by Anna Burns. This is a corker of a book. I kind of want to reread it already, which is a good sign. That's a really good sign for me. So it's told from this, we're set in the Troubles in Ireland, and we start off with, it's like, we get this smoking gun moment. We're like, okay, something obviously happened, and at this point, middle sister that's what she's called. She starts to tell the story of what has happened in this neighborhood, and it was really good. It was really, really good. I think I am ever so impressed by the cleverness of Anna Burns's use of language. So nothing is named. It's older sister, younger sister, middle sister, the little sisters, maybe boyfriend, oldest sister's husband, first brother-in-law, second brother-in-law. But she does that even with the names of her neighborhood and her friends and all of these characters, which felt very intimate, to be honest. It was an extremely intimate look at this young woman's life. Maybe I will bring this to me on my trip because I'm like, I want to read this again. Now, it does kind of get a little hairy at the end, meaning it starts to just get away from itself ever so slightly, but gosh, it was so good. It It was so good. And besides that one critique, I mean, it was just a fantastic, fantastic read. The rest are books that I read on my Kindle or from the library. I don't actually physically have with me, but the first two are The Duchess and The Princess by Wendy Holden. Whew, these are great. So these are about the British royal family, and I have talked about them kind of a lot on my channel, so I'm going to keep this somewhat brief. The Duchess is about Wallis Simpson, who ends up, she's not written like this, but the reality is that Wallis Simpson was a social ladder climber. And in this book, it's a very sympathetic look at this woman who ended up getting such a horrible reputation with the British royal family because she ends up marrying King Edward. Gosh, is it the 8th or the 7th? I always do this to myself. Edward VIII. She gets in a relationship with Edward VIII, who ends up abdicating the throne. But it is about their courtship, their friendship, their blooming relationship, and it was a really enjoyable read. The Princess is about Princess Diana, Diana Spencer, Diana, Princess of Wales, that person. And again, we are following the courtship of Diana and Charles. And what's interesting is that even though she focuses, in both books, she focuses on the courtship of these women, the stories play out very differently, and the stakes feel very, very different in both books. Diana is incredibly young, naive, and she, in a lot of ways, it's not quite an arranged marriage, but it is like heavy encouraging by the British royal family for Diana to, woo Charles, and a lot of pressure on Charles to take Diana as his wife. So both were really good. All the characters are really sympathetic. It's such a fascinating look at the British royal family. These are historical fiction, but Wendy Holden does such a great job. She constructs the novels incredibly well, and she writes the characters in a way that you very much root for them, which is wonderful. She could have taken it a different way, but that's the direction she took, and it works incredibly well for her. So let's think. Another book that I read, actually I read it on more of a whim with my friend Anita, and we read No Angel by Penny Vincenzi. Now, it's funny because No Angel, I think, has this reputation, or Penny Vincenzi's work, that she's writing women's fiction, romance, family saga. And it was that, but it was so good. It was so good. And I think it was so good because she just does it so well. So anyways, in this book, No Angel, we are following a family. And in this family, we have Oliver and Cecilia, I believe. But the family owns a publishing company. So it's this family that's working in books, working with authors, figuring out how to market things. What do they want to take on as their new projects, which is a fascinating way into a reader's heart and soul. It was a good way into my own heart, because I'm like, oh, it felt like the inside look of the publishing industry. So there's that. World War I, I think, it takes place during this novel, and we're following just a ton of different characters, and they're all just grand, flawed, wonderful, and I just think it was so good. I ended up really loving a lot of the characters. Some of them I didn't like, but that was, I think, very, very purposeful. But there was just something about the book that was addictively readable that pulled me through. Whenever something kind of got a little it would slow down a little bit, there was just a way in which it just pulled me right back in. And I am so glad for it, because it was just a fantastic book. And more people should be talking about Penny Vincenzi. She had a long writing career, and No Angel was just a special, special book. Okay, one of the most joyful reads this year was The Rachel Incident by Caroline O'Donoghue. The Rachel Incident is funny. I mean, really good, but also very sensitive and deep. So we're following Rachel and her best friend, who I can't remember his name right now. Her best friend is named James, and it's her gay best friend, which is a part of this whole ordeal. And so they're in that messy, icky, ucky part of life in their early 20s when they're really trying to figure out their life for like, they really are a bit of a hot mess, truly. And so they're trying really hard to, you know, get their life going. They're trying to figure out relationships, and it gets messy, and it gets messy fast. And I think it just gets to this like the pinnacle moment of where everything starts to come together. And it was such a hot mess hilarity of a scene that it made the whole thing all worth it. But there was just a really light touch to the whole novel that I really, really enjoyed. And ultimately they were diving into the relationship between two friends. And I love that. And, you know, it's like, I don't know, sometimes you get too close to somebody too soon. And in that, it's just a mess, you know, that can be messy, or that you have different expectations of what a best friend should be and how they should be there for you, which can be really messy. And so there are all these messy dynamics, and then also just trying to figure out their own individual love lives. And oh my gosh, but it was so good, and it was so funny. I really, really enjoyed this. And it was also an Irish book. I don't know if I've already said that, but if I haven't, it's an Irish book, Irish writer, set in Ireland. And, you know, I think that's, you know, important to know. I don't know if it adds anything or takes anything away, but there was just this humor to it that I absolutely loved. And it stands out as one of the best. Now, I don't know, I keep on thinking that this is the best book that I've read this year, but now that I've gone through all these books, I really don't know for sure. But one of my favorites was Amy Bloom's White Houses. In this, we are we're in the perspective of Lorena Hickok, who ended up having a very intimate relationship with Eleanor Roosevelt. And I don't know, it was so deeply sad, this book. It was so deeply sympathetic and sad, but also wonderful, and doing that thing where, you know, we're exploring the relationship between two people and the way that relationship ends up morphing and changing and evolving, and, you know, trying to understand that evolution. So good. But also Amy Bloom just does this phenomenal job writing Lorena Hickok. It's a very particular voice that was in my head when I was reading this. And I think and I'm a character-driven reader, so when you write a character and you give them a really strong voice and you give them a really, you know, it sounds to me like there's a particular way that Lorena speaks, and the way that she relays information, and the way that she tells a story, and that was all Amy Bloom. And I think that was really impressive as well. I don't think it was nearly as ambitious as, you know, Milkman by Anna Burns. I think she's like, also Middle Sister has a very particular voice that is hard to shake. But I think Amy Bloom did it, she was less ambitious, but she did it more impeccably. It was just so good. And there were just these moments, man, like I just could weep. Like, I don't know, it's sometimes like the way that life goes, and the way that things play out, the way that life plays out, the way things played out for Eleanor, that just made me feel for her. And I'm not like one of those people who are like, if the book makes me cry, like I love it so much. But there was something about the way that I was attached to these characters that I think speaks for itself. So I keep on thinking of that one as like my favorite book of the year, but you know, I don't really know. I did really, really enjoy it. And it was, I think, one of the most surprising, one of the strongest characters I've read, which I think plays into the experience, right? But I also can recognize that this book is not for everybody. I will just throw that out there. It is not for the faint of heart. Let me tell you that for sure. But also, like, the things that probably won't work for people is one of the reasons why it's one of my favorites. It's one of the reasons why I like the book. So anyways, that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you, and I hope to see you all in my next one. Bye.